Yo guys, what's going on? My name's Chris. Welcome to my channel, and we're going to talk about something today. The Supreme Court on Thursday blocked President Joe Biden's vaccine and testing requirement aimed at large business, but it allowed a vaccine mandate for certain healthcare workers to go into effect nationwide. This decision is a huge hit to Biden's attempts to use the power of the federal government to fight the COVID-19 pandemic. We're going to talk about this as a whole. Regardless of agreeing or not agreeing, we're going to talk about how this decision in our democracy, with the branches of our governments and the checks and balances institutionalized in our governments to block things or allow things, and how pivotal this decision is. So, getting into the show, I ask that you guys smash the like button, subscribe, and get ready because we're going to talk about a fiery decision. The president has emphasized the necessity of getting vaccinated against the virus for months and eventually decided to use the mandate on large employers as his main vehicle for convincing hesitant Americans to get their shots. In freezing a lower court opinion that allowed the regulation to go into effect nationwide, the majority sent a clear message. The Occupational Safety and Health Administration, also known as OSHA, charged with protecting workplace safety, overstepped its authority. In contrast, the justices said that a separate agency could issue a rule to protect the health and safety of Medicare and Medicaid patients. Biden issued a statement praising the rule on healthcare workers, but criticizing the ruling on businesses that will have the much wider effect. Although Congress has indisputably given OSHA the power to regulate occupational dangers, it has not given the agency the power to regulate public health more broadly. Requiring the vaccination of 84 million Americans selected simply because they work for an employer with more than 100 employees certainly falls in the latter category, the unsigned opinion in the business's case anyways. I am disappointed that the Supreme Court has chosen to block common sense, life-saving requirements for employees at large businesses that were grounded squarely in both science and law, President Biden says. Moving forward, President Biden says, quote, "It is now up to states and individual employers to determine whether to make their workplace as safe as possible for employees and whether their business will be safe for consumers during this pandemic by requiring employees to take the simple and effective step of getting vaccinated." The Biden administration defended the regulation and argued that the nation is facing a pandemic that is sickening and killing thousands of workers around the country, and that any delay in implementing the requirement to get a vaccine or submit to regular testing, quote, will result in unnecessary illness, hospitalization, and death. During oral arguments, the Biden administration had asked that, at the very least, if the court says employers can't require their employees to get the vaccine, it should leave in place an alternate requirement for masks and frequent testing. The majority rejected that request Thursday. So listen, that was the first part of the article that I read on CNN, and the link is going to be in the show notes if you guys want to check it out and read it for yourself, which primarily discussed the blocking of Biden's overreaching and tyrannical mandates for private employers. The government doesn't have the ability nor the reach currently, given this status, from the organization of our country to 2022 to be able to tell businesses what to do formally in law. As you can see, that with this blockage, the checks and balances system of our federal government by basically the top dog judges, if you will, blocked the overreaching suggestion by Biden because this isn't an executive order. This was supposed to be a law. An executive order is what these tyrannical, not only governors, some mayors, and in this case, president, have been using to declare that this is an emergency, and their executive orders that keep getting extended for over 2 years now, or getting close to it, something around 700 days, to execute their thought process on what businesses should do, including the shutdown of private businesses in March of 2020. The difference between an executive order and a law is democracy. Executive order is tyrannical, and there is no debating it for the most part until it comes up to be extended. Laws have to be passed, and that's why there's checks and balances, and that's why this case is so pivotal, that the mandates for larger employers aren't going to be able to mandate their employees to get vaccinated, tested, or wear masks in many cases. However, just like any good business deal, a good business deal is a deal that's good for both ends, okay? Just like any good business deal, the Supreme Court did compromise to a degree when it comes to the mandate for healthcare workers. Now I'm going to read that part. Although the justices have been receptive to past attempts by states to mandate vaccines, the new disputes centered on federal requirements that raised different legal questions. The case come to the Supreme Court in an unusual posture because the justices are only being asked to block the requirements while the legal challenges play out. The court allowed to take effect the vaccine policy rolled out in November by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, which sought to require the COVID-19 vaccine for certain healthcare workers at hospitals, nursing homes, and other facilities that participate in Medicare and Medicaid programs. Note, 24 lower courts at the state level have already rejected this mandate, or in this case, this change of rules and law, meaning half of the country does not believe in this and half of the country does. Very typical of left-right, very typical of black-white, very typical of gay-straight. And I'm not saying any of that has to do with these mandates and half the country not believing and half the country believing when it comes to local governments. What I am saying is, though, we are a bit divided when it comes to our thought processes on this, quote, pandemic. Now, let's take a look at the healthcare workers and that mandate a little bit more extensively, okay? And I'm just going to give you some perspective. It's primarily for patients on Medicare and Medicaid, okay? Generally speaking, those patients are going to be retired as their federal and or state programs that participate and help with them, which would constitute the average person being north of 65 years old, more than likely 75, 85, 95 years old. Now, if you believe the statistics that COVID has a 99.7% survival rate, which it does, that the average person that dies from COVID most likely is going to fall into that elder age of 80s and be on one of these programs. So I understand why this was passed, not necessarily agree with it. I also understand why it was passed for the case of healthcare workers being in the setting where people are being treated for COVID, meaning they're around COVID, meaning that if they're going to be around people with COVID, mandating the healthcare workers to have the vaccine, I understand it, okay? I do. I understand it. I don't agree that it is mandated, that there's no choice behind it to keep your job. But I do understand it. Remember, in business and in life, good deals are ones that are good for both parties. For instance, you buy your first house for $250,000, $250,000. The asking price was $260,000. And you come in as the buyer and say, I'll give you $250,000. Well, the seller looks at it and says, well, it's only $10,000 below my asking price. I accept. And you as the buyer offered $250,000 from $260,000, you accept. That's a good deal. Both parties are happy. In this case, private employers aren't being mandated. However, healthcare workers are. So that's a deal, if you will. The whole proposal wasn't blocked, but the whole proposal wasn't accepted. And if it was accepted, I really think that would have been a huge sign of disastrous federal government situations in 2020, to include local elections that are coming around for state governors in this year, 2022, specifically November. I'm actually very pleased with the overall outcome of us as a country moving forward, and see this decision as taking a step in the proper direction as a country, as Americans, in upholding the checks and balances system of the three-pronged government that we have. Some would say it's 4 prongs with the media now, but technically speaking, it is 3. And the Supreme Court, the Supreme Justice, in my opinion, took a step forward and did the right thing. Could it have been done better? Absolutely. Was it done terribly? No. This is a win in our book. That's what I got for you today, guys. I know it's a mouthful. It's just my perspective. I want to know your perspective. We're building a community. We're getting a lot of comments on the show. Thank you. Drop your thoughts below. Let's talk about it. Even if you don't agree, let's talk about it as adults. And smash that like button and consider subscribing. I got more coming. I'll catch you next time. Peace.